it to the computer. All right. Yeah, so this workshop is really more just a psychoeducational format. This little blip is more for my my professional liability. It's really just saying like this is information only. Use your own best judgment with it. It's not a substitution for like a personal assessment. So I hope it can give helpful information and give you directions of where to go to get more information. But please use your own best judgment and get qualified support if you need to go deeper with any of it. Um, so about the term the highly sensitive person, it really comes out of the research of Dr. Elaine Aron. So it's a highly researched trait. She's been researching it for a few decades already. There's many peer-reviewed studies around sensitivity, and she has a self-test on her website. If you haven't done it in recent years, it's actually recently been updated because she's been continuing to research and refine it. It's gone through many revisions already. So it can be interesting to go back to it and see what's changed and where you might score with it. It is not a diagnosis. So it's not something like anxiety, depression. Do we have this? Do we treat it? And then hopefully not have it anymore. And it's not a negative thing. It's more just a nervous system difference. So it's it's theory theorized that it results from an evolutionary strategy of kind of hang back, wait, get more information before jumping right in. It's been found in about 15 to 20% of the population. So this is for people, it's across cultures, it's also in different species. So they have some studies with that hang back wait. There's certain about 15 to 20% of fish will hang back when other fish go rushing out to eat the food to be like, okay, is it safe? And the risk is they may not get as much food, but also if like a predator is going to come in or something's going to, if that food is not good, they have a better chance of survival in that condition. So evolution is all about diversity. Um, and so it's really not, it's nothing negative, but there can be pros and cons to it. And it's not something we choose. It's really just more how our nervous system is wired. Our brains seem to process like sensory information a lot more deeply, and it takes more energetic bandwidth in our brain. Um, the studies that they've have found that equal numbers of men and women would meet criteria for being highly sensitive, but it's often the reporting scales were a little bit different for women and men just because it's not as valuable of a trait in Western culture for men to be sensitive. So there's often more pressure for boys at a young age to kind of like be tough and don't show sensitivity, don't feel things deeply. So not as many may self-report. There have been some studies that show that highly sensitive people might be more vulnerable to depression, anxiety, maybe social anxiety if they have a difficult childhood. But with a good enough childhood, they're not any more likely than non-sensitive people to experience any of the above. And there's even some research to suggest that they may do even better. So, that one, if people have had a challenging childhood, that is not a life sentence, I would say as well. About some of the older studies found that about 50% of people seeking therapy were highly sensitive. And so one of the things with highly sensitive people is they tend to be a lot like more self-aware, kind of aware of what's going on in their own system. And when things work for us, it's like tools can be very helpful. So it's not like there's more people in therapy because they're more messed up or anything. It just may be more of like they actually may benefit more. And I don't know if this statistic is actually still true because I think like mental health, there's been a lot more destigmatization, a lot more people are open to it. A lot of people see the benefit of like you don't have to be really struggling or even have a mental health diagnosis. And that's one of the benefits in Canada too, is many health like US healthcare systems often have you have to have a diagnosis to qualify for insurance, and there's a lot of barriers, whereas if you have an employee assistance program or just you have a certain amount of benefits in Canada, you can kind of use those how you want. So it could be mental health, but I mean, I have clients who use it just to better understand themselves or they want to do even better than they're already doing. And definitely when we catch things early, with any type of health, like prevention and early intervention is a lot more cost effective in terms of our time, energy, and even just like financial investment than waiting for things to get really bad. So it's not really like it's not a disorder. It's not an official diagnosis in any way. Like it's not in the DSM. So if people are looking for like workplace accommodations or other things, like it would not usually qualify for that. There'd have to be like some other kind of like more medical term, unless it's just more informal and their employer's supportive and they don't need to go through like a formal HR process. So it's not like you to go for an assessment and someone's like, here, you are this. It's you, if you take the self-test and you identify, you can use that term if it's helpful for you. And many people do find figuring out that they are highly sensitive can explain a lot and it can be really validating. But I would also add that sometimes kind of reading books like The Highly Sensitive Person going through the workbook, it can bring up mixed emotions too, because we almost go back and process like our childhood differently and be like, oh man, that kind of sucks, or it's sad, or there's grief, or there can be loss with it as well as validation, because if we knew better, we could have done things better for ourselves. If our parents knew better or like teachers and school systems knew better, it's like we could have been a lot better supported. And so I just want to normalize that if that does come up for people. And so some kind of important points for from Dr. Aaron's work with highly sensitive people is that for anyone, whether they're highly sensitive or not, we have these windows of peak performance. It's a certain level of anxiety or stress can help us do better because it can motivate us to prepare, rehearse, like get ready for the job interview, practice, um, put in the effort when the stress leads to us actually doing the things we need to do and not procrastinating or avoiding. But once stress levels get too high, that overstimulation, when we start getting into fight, flight, freeze, it's like then our performance drops. It basically just drops off a cliff. It's like if we have anxiety, someone can study and know the material and then just blank out or panic and not be able to retrieve it. Or they could, if they're in sports, they could practice really well and know how to do the move, but in that competition setting, they can just like it just falls apart. So some of it can be that like psychological anxiety. And so for all of us, we do better in this like window of optimal arousal, but highly sensitive people, we're because we process that sensory information more deeply in our brain, we more easily go into a fight, flight, freeze and this like physiological over arousal. And so then we can have more experiences of like, oh, I blew that, or I choked, or I didn't do as well as I wanted to, and that can be hard. And so we don't want to necessarily being able to work with that arousal level can be helpful. So, and not, it's not that we're not good at things or personal. It's just like we have a more sensitive system. I'll often use metaphors like it's neutral, but there's pros and cons to different systems. Like if you have a nervous system that's built a bit more like a Honda Accord, you can kind of bang on it. You don't have to take that good a care of it. It does the job. It's like it doesn't require as much maintenance, but it may not have the same performance level or same edge in certain things. Like you don't want to street race the thing, just factory model. But if you have a like a luxury car like a Maserati, it can have these really high performance, but if you are not maintaining that vehicle, like it is a lot more effort and work. It's more expensive. So it can perform really well in certain situations, but then it also breaks down a lot more easily when you're not caring for it. Or it's like an orchid or a spider plant kind of thing. And those aren't direct, it's not, those are directly applied to people, but the sensitive, there's some benefits of sensitivity, but then there are some higher maintenance pieces that can be frustrating when you're dealing with that in your own nervous system and just wanting to be able to push through. Also, especially in Western culture, like high sensitivity is not really our culture's ideal. We are in a pretty like capitalistic, fast-paced, productivity's king kind of culture, and in general, burnout rates are really high. Highly sensitive people, we often are even more at risk of burnout because like we can perform really well, but we may need more downtime, more breaks, like more breaks from that energetic or sensory overload. So we need to be a little more careful about how much we're pushing ourselves and in how many different domains of our life we're pushing ourselves because we may not be able to take on as much. We can be successful and we can be high achieving. We can meet clear goals, but it may be harder on us, or we may our body or nervous system may not like it as much if we're really pushing ourselves too far. Um, I touched on that point in the last one of there is some research that highly sensitive people are more affected than others by being raised in bad home environments. With the trauma training I have around this, one of my theories with this would be for any like distressing emotional memory, our brains and nervous systems actually hold and process that memory differently. So, and we all have some level of this. It doesn't always mean there's a like full on PTSD diagnosis, but anyone in a human nervous system has certain triggers. It might be like the way someone looks at you, it might be a certain personality style where we may have an emotional reaction that bothers us, or we might be stressed out, worried, anxious, ruminate, like have trouble sleeping, and our rational mind wants us to just let it go or not be bothered by it, but it kind of hits on something that like happened in the past that has some intensity to that emotional memory. And because highly sensitive people, our brains can go into that overwhelm more easily. Like it makes sense in that prone to trauma piece because people can go through the same event and have a very different experience of it. It's like there's many events that have a higher risk of trauma, but not everything causes trauma to everyone. And an example for that might be if you're in a car with a few other people and you end up getting in a car accident, like everyone's okay. If one person wasn't even looking and didn't know what was happening, it's like they may be less likely to be traumatized by it because they weren't afraid or bracing. Like even their body recovery is usually easier because they didn't brace for the impact. Um, Whereas if someone like saw it, was worried, like had their didn't know in for a split second if they were going to make it through it, it's like they may be more at risk of their brain going into fight, flight, or freeze, and then they may have a lot more panic PTSD symptoms or even just like driving anxiety later. And even when our brain knows we're safe, it's like if the car was like turning left and it was winter time, there was a certain band on the radio, our brain connects kind of all of those things that are happening. So we're at much more risk of having kind of a panic reaction if it's winter again and we're turning left, or like that song comes on again, even though our rational mind knows like those things themselves didn't cause the accident. It could be the person who wasn't looking. Um, our like evolutionary wise, our brain is and bodies are really good at making those associations to protect us and keep us safe really quickly. So the kind of that's the bad news. The good news is tr if working with trauma processing techniques can help move that old emotional memory through our system. And I find like when highly sensitive people are self-aware, we're often a lot more aware of like, oh, there's something coming up or I'm having this reaction inside of me. And when we have that awareness, we can actually get tools and use things to work with it and move it. And so that's one of the kind of benefits. Some of the common traits for highly sensitive people are we feel kind of higher highs and lower lows, not in a mental health way, not in a way that's different from the general population in terms of like feeling a totally different feeling, but if there's something really moving, it's like we're going to have this extra level of like how powerful and profound that felt. If something's really heartbreaking or sad, it's like we might feel that a lot more. Like we might tear up with a commercial or something where other people are like, "Oh, that's kind of sad, but I didn't feel quite as high or quite as low." Uh, we often kind of prefer to sit back a little bit and kind of assess or take in a situation before jumping right into it. We often see this with children too. They usually don't like highly sensitive children, usually need to kind of hang out on the periphery a little bit before they kind of warm up and like get right in there in a new group or a new classroom. Um, so we don't always want to like force ourselves to override that because we can go into that over arousal, but it can be, okay, how do we work with this to kind of warm up and take as much in as we can? Like an example would be, again, that anxiety performance of if we have a job interview or like a high level presentation we haven't done before, if we can map out if we can figure out like how to drive there ahead of time, if we can get familiar with the room, if there's like certain interviewers, if we can find out anything about them ahead of time, any reducing the novelty and like helping us prepare can help bring down that overall arousal level. We can be really aware of like subtleties and small changes. We take in a lot of detail. And we often are really deep thinkers and deep processors, so we might want to consider every detail and possible outcome before we jump right in. So it can be less impulsive, like maybe do it once and do it right. We tend to be heavily attuned to cause and consequences, which again can be a double-edged sword. Like it's good to think things through. There's benefits to that. The downside of the same trait is we can also be a little prone to kind of that analysis paralysis, or like at a certain point there may be times where we need to like put limits on how far ahead we're thinking. Especially when we throw anxiety into the mix because our brains can start trying to want to figure out everything, and it's like we may not have enough information or it may not be time to even make those decisions yet. An example might be trying to decide like, oh, do I need to quit my job right now? And it's like, well, maybe we need to talk to somebody first or make a few changes here or like see what happens with management changes and see how that all falls out before we like go right in. And we might need to be putting out some actually applications and seeing what's out there, networking and be like, is there an actual real offer on the table? Because if we don't want to just quit and we don't have a plan for that, like we don't want to just be thinking of all the possibilities until they're actually closer to like what possibilities do I need are in front of me right now too, and what steps do I need to take to explore those. We can be more aware of the thoughts and emotions of others, and this can come into boundaries and communication styles. So I'll get more into that later on. Um, yeah, again, it can be more harmed by negative environments in childhood, adulthood, but can possibly gain more from supportive environments. And good news with adults is like as adults, we have a lot more agency and options around finding supportive environments and finding tools that help. And again, many things can leave an imprint, but they don't need to be a life sentence. We tend to act more conscientiously. Again, we're more aware of other people's feelings. We're we can often be more bothered by not being in alignment with our own values as well. Uh, Other traits can be things like having a higher level of concern about social justice or the environment, having a high level of compassion for other people, which again is like I think a really positive thing in the world, but it can tip into just higher risk of possible burnout or compassion fatigue or even vicarious trauma if we're kind of supporting everybody and getting too overwhelmed by everything. We also want to have spaces where we can be supported or where we're not kind of everybody's just dumping on us and we don't have places. Sometimes we need to have boundaries around like how much we're taking on or how much we're holding space for. Talked about being the overstimulated, like that again, that sensory processing, the brain processing more deeply. You can be more bothered by things like I know when I'd work downtown, I'd have to like as soon as I got a new job downtown, I'd be like packing my own standing lights in so I could like shut off like disable figure out how to disable the fluorescent lights that are in the whole building because I was like I just can't. I'm gonna go nuts if I have to sit under these all day long. We often know what it needs to make a space feel more like pleasing, more comfortable. It can be things like even like what fabrics you like to wear and clothes, like so that it does. Kids may not like tags, or they may only have certain fabrics, or they're like not gonna wear it. Um, Sometimes some highly pe sensitive people may be more gifted or artistic or passionate about the arts, or anything that really helps. Like it might be music or things that really get them in touch with different feelings, and strong emotional reactions. Many people have a strong interest in spirituality or often involved in specific practices. Elaine Aron it she is publishing a new book on highly sensitive people and spirituality. I don't think it's released yet, but it's coming out soon. And I'm really curious to see what her take on that is going to be. Because she, in a few of her other books, she briefly mentions highly sensitive people having more psychic experiences or unusually vivid dreams and like things around spirituality and intuition. She touches on quickly and then she doesn't say more and moves on. But I found in kind of my own journey because I kind of stumbled into my own spiritual awakening process when I was already in the field of psychology. And before that, I was very like non-spiritual, not religious. I didn't really know. I thought maybe the placebo effect, but I think there's some things where people are a lot more sensitive to almost this like quantum field of like all this other information that's not just only ours. And traditional mental health doesn't really recognize that. And what I've seen kind of just in my own practice and specializing in this area is that many highly sensitive people are actually a lot more intuitive than they may realize because our culture and society, and especially our mental health systems, have lost how to make sense of that. It did exist in many indigenous cultures. It was very common, but in kind of colonial, like just church as the authority, like it was actively discourage or like witch hunts basically of like you have to go to these other people. You don't have it directly between you and like it doesn't have to be God. It might be like universe, your higher self, like something bigger than you, but a personal relationship that's something beyond just your logical mind. So I think, yeah, I'm curious to see what she'll say about that. And I'll get more about the intuitive piece on the empathic ability because that is like one form of intuition as well. And highly sensitive people might have a harder time with change. Again, there's like that deep processing. It can throw us off. We might be kind of going down, okay, all the possible options that could happen. And because it's a nervous system trait and just a nervous system wiring, it didn't just develop all of a sudden. It's like we usually had these traits like from we may have been the difficult to calm infant or like I think my mom has stories of me like tensing up and crying and then someone would come in the door like 5 minutes later who was a really intense family member and it was like this little alarm's going off before it's even clear that this person's here. But yeah, sometimes they're the harder to transition kids. They don't necessarily sleep everywhere. They can be more stressed out. It's like, why don't you just get in there with all the other kids? And because it's only recent generations where we've understood more about highly sensitive children and people. So I definitely wasn't raised in a like in a generation that even knew what that was or what to do with it. Um, yeah, again, sometimes that overstimulating or like unpleasant environments, highly sensitive people usually don't do great in like open concept classrooms or offices where just like everybody's talking, everyone can interrupt all the time. There's a lot of noise going on. If you can have a private office, it's usually a lot better, or even just like be in a corner or have some kind of barrier on or noise canceling headphones, like that can help a lot. Sometimes there's more physical sensitivities, like greater sensitivity to pain, stimulants, or medications or substances. Um, so many people may have bigger reactions with like caffeine, alcohol, even like medical medications. There is some research, and I would usually recommend for my highly sensitive clients talking to their doctors about um, like Google search could have it. I have a few links if anyone would like those. Just send me a note. There is some research that shows like highly sensitive people tend to respond to lower than therapeutic dose for the general population. So even if someone's exploring like like a mental health medication trial, they might want to advocate with their doctor to see like what's the lowest dose possible to start at because again, clinical trials are like a certain percent of the population that they do that with, and it's 15 to 20% of the population is highly sensitive. So that the doses they recommend may not, some highly sensitive people can notice benefit even below that dose, where like the research says it shouldn't really be doing anything, but it might be highly sensitive people, because we're really attuned to like what people may be feeling or knowing, we often speak in a considerate but often indirect way. We're usually good at picking up on like if someone's hinting towards something if they don't directly say no. Um, from my experiences and also like traveling and experiencing other cultures, like Canadians can be indirect in certain ways as well too, that there can be a cross-cultural issue sometimes too. And I'll get more into that in some of the things that make us more prone to burnout, because that speaking style can be one of them as well. And a lot of highly sensitive people really benefit from nature. They might feel connected to nature. It can feel really healing, calming, being moved by its beauty. And there is a lot of studies that show, I mean, humans as a species, like we evolved in natural settings. So there can be definitely benefits for getting outside. There's benefits for getting into spaces that are more nature based, even like having a plant in an office or your house, or like a screensaver or pictures of natural beauty, like that can help mimic that as well. Even pets can also be like another connection to that like natural energy too. A lot of highly sensitive people might find a lot of calming and grounding with like their pets as well. And so before I go into the empathic ability, I'll talk a bit about the intuitive information and really like how we receive intuitive information. So in my experience with kind of with spiritual awakening and transpersonal psychology, which is more of that kind of gets into the paranormal realm, but more of like the soul of psychology. And this is not always recognized by most standard mental health. Many people would say like this isn't real, or and I was definitely skeptical too until I started experiencing things myself that I could actually have validation from in the real world. But intuitive information tends to come through the gateway of our five senses. It's not dramatic like it is in the movies or on TV shows. It's usually a lot more subtle and it just has a bit of a different quality than kind of our regular senses. So there's things like clear seeing, hearing, feeling, knowing tend to be the top three, and smelling and tasting can happen for people, but they tend to be a lot more rare. I also do have a quiz on my website, so if people are curious about that, you could take the quiz. Again, this is not a diagnosis, it's more just for your own information and if you want to go deeper with it. Oftentimes, if people want to develop more intuition, we may be like, oh, I want to see things or hear things, but we tend to have a dominant intuitive ability that is just kind of our default. It's like the one we're born with. There may be one or two. And the more we learn to pay attention to that one and work with it, it's like the other ones will start to like open up and get more clear over time. But it's the gateway in is to really work with the one that is your dominant one anyway. And it does shift and evolve over time. When I kind of first started on this path, I remember feeling like it's like, oh, I want to know what my gifts are. Like it's a Christmas present that you open and just get to like have fun playing with. But it's really not how it works. It's like it's a skill that you get better and better at developing, and it's a skill like any other skill where some kids you have like Mozart level children who just could like play musical instruments from such a young age without training. There's some people who talk about like seeing angels or these intuitive abilities or how they've been psychic their entire life, and so a lot of times it can feel like you either have it or you don't, but it is something that it's like we can actually develop it more over time, with more practice and experience as well. So a lot of times it's these subtle differences where it's not necessarily like seeing a whole spirit right in front of you. It can be a sense in the mind's eye. It might be overhearing a snippet of conversation, like a song on the radio that you keep catching or hear multiple times. But there often seems to be a quality to an intuitive information where it feels like time slows down a little bit. You might get goosebumps. It seems to kind of be, it feels like it's almost this. I compare it to like it's like that universe source, higher self guidance. It's like your personal GPS that'll give you a little bit of like, turn right here. It doesn't give you the whole picture, or it might give you like some sense of where you're going, but it doesn't give you all the steps in a row the way our logical mind wants us to. Um, and sometimes it's just a feeling like, sometimes there's just this like, I don't trust that person or I don't get a good feeling with them. And I can't, like, they haven't actually done anything. I don't really get why, but we might find out later. oh, I see, I found out more about their personality. I see more about like they weren't telling the truth. Like now it actually makes sense. Like for me, my first kind of inkling that intuition was real was through like not th like overriding it and being like, I'm this, like, I feel like I'm being over anxious or paranoid. Like, why am I having this reaction? And then finding out all this information about someone where I was like, oh, no, I was picking up on something there that just didn't have all the pieces together. So there's something here around this. The clairsentience is really the one around the feeling spot. So that is really feeling emotions or physical sensations of others in our own body, and it feels like they're ours. So this one, empathic ability is a hard one. If we could just go and pick our intuitive ability, I would not recommend picking this one, but it's just we just have it. This was my dominant ability when I first started getting into that intuitive development. I had gone to an intuitive workshop and it was an ongoing series, but we'd have to go through these different exercises with like partners we didn't know. And when we went through one that was really more into like tuning into the body feelings, I noticed my entire experience inside shift. Like it was like the the emotional feeling shifted, the like there was this like heaviness in my heart. There was physical like pain or sensations going on. So people can be aware of like physical sensation empaths, like they might get a headache out of nowhere and then their coworker's like, "Oh, I have a migraine today." And then it goes away when they realize that. So it's like this isn't an actual physical thing going on. It's more you're picking up on someone else's. Or it can also be emotional. Like you might feel really sad or upset or like collective energies can be pretty intense these days. So it can just be like I feel really off when there's like a big event going on or a lot of stuff happening in the news. And so those kind of things are forms of empathic ability. And what I find is really tricky with empathic ability is I didn't realize I was empathic. I was mid 20s or later. It's like we often don't realize we are until we actually like slow down enough, get out of our head enough, get connected with our body enough, and have an experience where it's like, oh, this actually isn't mine. Um, and so the piece with the empath part is it is not researched in the same way that the highly sensitive person trait is. There is, if you search empathic stuff online, you will get such a wild west of answers out there. So I would just caution anyone to like take things with a grain of salt. There is a lot of really false information online. There's a lot of people just kind of yeah, you don't have as many credible people talking about it. And I'm not saying that you have to have a degree to understand what's going on, but it's just I've heard some wild things in terms of like seeing things on social media or YouTube where it's like, what? This is not like we're here to transmute the collective suffering of the world. Like basically like we're supposed to be a sponge and just suffer. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't believe that at all. Like if we are drowning in everybody else's pain, like how are we supposed to help at all? Um, and so I don't think it's our job to take it all on. I just think we've lost a lot of those ancient wisdom traditions where like shamans or there'd be traditional lineages that would recognize these gifts and ability in children and teach them from a younger age or mentor them of like how do you actually work in this energetic realm in a way that's safe for you that you're not absorbing everything. And our Western culture has really like lost that. But I think awareness is starting to come back. So Dr. Judith Orloff is a psychiatrist out of the US. She wrote the Empath Survival Guide and she has some good resources. She's one of the people I would recommend. I find a lot of people find this, again, similar to Highly Sensitive Person book. This one can be also helpful, but it can be a bit like there can be some processing that comes up with it as well. And these are some of the self-tests she has. When I send the recording summary, I'll also send links to go check out any of these self-tests if you would like to do those on your own too. But I also find with this book, and I've actually had the opportunity where I was able to book like a private consultation with her because I found I have kind of a unique different areas of specialty training over the years. I've been in this field for almost 2 decades now. and just kind of going through my own process of trying to understand what was going on for me and what tools would be effective. I found the Empath Survival Guide is very helpful for validating, like, this is what's going on. These are some signs you might be empathic, and here's ways to kind of set boundaries and take care of your energy. But from my experience, I find that it kind of stops there, and I find that that is a little bit limited. So I want to offer another potential perspective for people who want to go deeper or beyond that is I do think if we work with some of our like childhood belief systems and some unconscious, subconscious beliefs, it's like we can actually start to shift that empathic ability and not take on so much and not be absorbing other people's emotions or like physical pain in such an intense way. Like this empathic ability used to be my dominant ability, but it is not anymore. And I've done a lot of active work because I didn't like it. Like it's I would get hit with things so intensely that it'd be hard not to be in tears or in like physical pain. It was hard to function like that. And then I had to do a lot of like clearing and protection on this like energetic level just to be not being like absorbing and carrying all this stuff every day. But I found as I worked with like almost like the little kid in me who had that was always super sensitive, but helping that child understand of like this is going on, but you can love people, you can care about them, but you can kind of be in your own bubble or not have to feel this to this level. It's like then it started to shift. And I started to learn more tools to like work on the energetic side, which was like beyond the typical Western psychology, which actually helped make things a lot more manageable. So a little bit about the highly sensitive people versus being empathic is, yeah, I've touched on that. Like it's researched. Empathic is not researched, so be careful with that one. Hopefully more will come out with it. And not everyone who's highly sensitive is also empathic. Not all empathics identify as being highly sensitive, but there tends to be more overlap with empathic people also being highly sensitive in some areas too. Some of the common presenting concerns that can come up a lot for highly sensitive people or empaths, and again, we won't get into all of these today, of course, is the boundaries. Um, Especially on the empathic level, we tend to just we feel so much that sometimes it's not just the like learning communication strategies and the cognitive mind or ways to think about things differently. It's like we might need to work with energetic boundaries because we may just take on other people's emotions and then be more invested without realizing we're taking on their energy. Burnout is a big one. I've had my own cycles of burnout over the years, and so I've gotten a lot better at recognizing it, but I know it's part of the double-edged sword of like some of these personality traits, as well as the highly sensitive and empathic traits. So I'll move into burnout here too. And again, I'm going to go through some things. I won't go into depth of every single point on each slide, but if there's more information people want, I can also send some more resources your way too. Burnout is really, it's a state of emotional, mental, and often physical exhaustion. So it's really comes out of periods of really long and ongoing stress. The research around burnout was first in occupational burnout, but we now know that burnout can be due to stressors in any area of life. So it could be workplace, it can be like if you're in a stressful or chaotic relationship, it can be being a caregiver. It's really more of there's more energy going out than is coming in to like replenish. Almost like if you drive your car long enough and you put in a little bit of gas, but you're not replacing the gas you're using up, like that car is going to eventually not run or it's going to run out of gas on the side of the road. So, very simplified version of like burnout's like our human equivalent of that. It tends to go through three phases, and these go in kind of a continuum with more mild symptoms getting more moderate and severe as burnout levels progress. And I will also send out some burnout rating scales for people. Again, it's not to diagnose anything, but it's more of like this is just some things to look out for and keep an eye on. So, things like fatigue, insomnia, forgetfulness, concentration, physical symptoms. We can get more as it progresses, we can have more illness, have a harder time recovering. And again, there's overlaps in things like anxiety, anger, depression. So it could be like irritability at first or not enjoying things as much. But as things progress, it kind of goes into more like we might get more frustrated with work, and then it can start being withdrawing at home and not wanting to do things we used to enjoy, not wanting to see friends, like just kind of zoning out on the couch or feeling irritable, feeling like there's no point, losing meaning. It can often get to feeling really almost like you're floating above your body and like going through the motions, but really numb, um, and really disconnected. I really think it's important for people to know part of why I'm passionate about t bringing more education around burnout is that there's been a lot more kind of public awareness around people seem to understand more about signs and symptoms of depression or anxiety. And so one of the concerns is a lot of times I see people kind of in my practice or in other areas where they're like, oh, I'm worried because some of this is flagging depression symptoms. And burnout, it is complicated where it can lead to a depressive episode, or it's most often, if there is a diagnosis, it usually ends up being diagnosed as depression because burnout itself is not like in the DSM. The World Health Organization recognizes it, but many doctors or physicians and people going through it don't realize like this is actually ongoing stress that has led is now turning into a depressive episode. It's not just depression that came out of nowhere. And the really important distinction with that piece is burnout also needs rest and like not overworking the same neurological circuits over and over again so that they have time to recover as part of recovery. Whereas if it's just kind of depression, it's like what most people know is like, okay, I don't feel like doing these things. I'm not motivated. I'm not enjoying it. And I have to push through and do it anyway and force myself to do it. And then I'll feel better. If we're in burnout, if we are forcing ourselves to go on beyond our capacity without getting that recharge, we can actually make burnout a lot worse. So it's just important to know to check for that as well. And we need more of a holistic kind of plan of like how do we recover? How do we make sure things are more sustainable and we're not kind of like just having this crash, getting a little bit more energy and going right back into a crash again. One of the kind of yeah, like challenges, another challenge with burnout too is when it's getting more moderate or severe, we can feel like we're less effective and accomplish less, and we actually are. Like it can start to affect us cognitively and in terms of productivity. We make more mistakes. Like it can get to the point where people are concerned in getting screened for like memory impairment or like is dementia or something going on. And I mean, if there are that level of symptoms, of course, I'd say like check everything out, make sure, like screen it just in case. But sometimes it's like burnout can do that actually. Like burnout can lead to full on like mental health breakdowns. It can lead to people feeling like there's no point of being alive and they can be at risk for their safety. It can lead to like feeling very seriously impaired mentally. And if that's going on a long, long time, it's like it may make people more vulnerable to like chronic illness or other things. So I don't want to scare anyone, but I want people to take it seriously of like we can override our mental health and our physical body to a certain point, but not forever. And so oftentimes it's like if we've been doing that for too long, it might be months, like weeks, months, it can be decades, or it can be later in life where it's like our body and brain and our mental health will start saying no and stopping that in different ways where it's like you can't keep pushing beyond like what's coming back in anymore, or the cost is really high. Um, yeah, and like I touched on kind of earlier, prior to the pandemic, research found that about half of workers experience burnout at some point in their life. So, since during and post pandemic, burnout rates have gotten worse. There can be a number of reasons for this, but I think it was like there was so much ongoing change and so much uncertainty in the pandemic, and also like once things opened up again, most workplaces like were really not nervous system informed at all, where they're like, okay, back to normal. And like everybody needs to almost be more productive to catch up. And so, but most people's nervous system was not everyone was like getting rest during that time. Like it was challenging for a lot of people. So I think it's just kind of progressively like it has not gone down since then. I've never seen such high levels in like the 20 years I've been in psychology. So if you're feeling it, like you're definitely not alone. And it's unfortunately just really common. About so here's some of the survey results here. Like 42% of millennials report burnout rates, Gen X higher burnout rates. Yeah, anyone kind of early career, child rearing years, like just working to get established, are some of the like highest levels, some in that sandwich generation. So there's a lot of concerns about high levels of workplace stress and just burnout rates overall. Some of the things like I won't go into detail with each of these slides because they're like whole things to go into themselves, but basically there's kind of three levels of contributors that can make us more at risk of burnout. There's like our own personality and the personal things we bring to different situations. There's the situation or like workplace stress, so kind of these like concentric circles that are rippling out. And then there's also these like societal, cultural, like systemic oppression areas. So in that personal contributor part, and the personal ones are often the ones we have more control over, and that we can actually, when we do work with these, we can get better at managing them, better at recognizing them, and better at kind of keeping them in check for ourselves so that we're not always at as high of risk of burnout. And I say we because I have most of these, and I have when I didn't know what burnout was, I burnt out following grad school and early, like being early in the mental health field. I got a one-way ticket and I went to India, Nepal, and like that's where my spiritual awakening happened. That's for other topics, but and then I was volunteering to recover from like just being so fried, and I ended up burning myself out in a volunteer like relaxed environment by saying yes to everything, never saying no, like and then I realized there, I was like, okay, this isn't just like grad school and it's not just this like high-paced environment. Like nobody looking around me, everybody else is really relaxed and like hippie chill. And I am so fried and I've recreated like what I left. And so sometimes, I mean, sometimes we don't always have control at work and it is expected of us to like be working all the time and there's actual consequences if we don't do that. And other times we actually may have more control than we think we do. And I find this a lot for most professional jobs now, unless you kind of go into a workplace like I talk about the fantasy of scooping ice cream or something where you're like, I just go in, do it, and then I'm done and I leave it there. Most of our lives are not like that. Like most of us live in systems where we can mentally be thinking about things all the time. There's often more work to get done than we could ever actually do. And even if we work more, like there's still going to be more. So I think these working with these personal contributors is more important than ever. Um, so for people who are more high achieving, for this like perfectionism style and the highly sensitive piece is like that indirect communication is like we don't usually clearly set boundaries in the same way. And because most of the population is not highly sensitive, it can, even if it's like, even if our workplace was supportive, it'll often get missed. Because it might be like, hey, could you take this on? You might be like, hey, how about so and so does it? And they're like, no, you're good. Instead of being like, I actually can't deliver on this. Like, I have this on the go, this on the go. If you want me to deliver on this, what do you want me to prioritize? Like, what needs to come first? Can we have a meeting to go through this? We often need to get more comfortable with like a lot more of a direct communication style so that we can kind of set better boundaries and let people know like what we already have on our plate. Um, in terms of the high achieving piece, over and under functioning is also another important component. So over and under functioning are really they're a default stress response where it's not something we choose. It tends to just be our like kind of lifelong default pattern in times of stress. So over functioners in a stressful situation, like if there's a family crisis, it's like they're the one who kind of takes over. Like they'll take control to be like, this needs to get done. Someone needs to contact here. Like I'll make the call. I'll do this. They leap into action. They get a lot done. They can be pretty competent, and our culture values this style. Like it's a lot more productive. But the shadow side of it is that it can be a way of avoiding vulnerable feelings. We can end up micromanaging, and we can end up like not actually letting anyone else support us. We can take on way too much. And in times of stress or crisis, we'll usually have a burst in productivity, but it's like we'll crash later or set ourselves up for crashing later. And we can end up feeling like resentful or upset. And we kind of do it to ourselves because we didn't actually communicate clearly or like let other people step up too. And especially in relationship dynamics, like over and under functioning, like tend to reinforce themselves. Like if you have someone who's kind of doing everything, someone like gets better at under functioning, and then there's more resentment. So these are patterns that can be like changed with conscious awareness and work. Under functioning is like the opposite one. It's kind of like deer in the headlights of like, I don't know what to do. Someone fix this for me, like freeze. But because this was geared more towards like high achievers, it's high achievers are usually over functioners. They're usually not under functioners. They just may more, if they get into that over arousal or procrastinate too long, they may end up underperforming, but it's usually because it's driven by like overdoing it. A high achieving person is really someone who's always setting and pursuing challenging goals, working hard to accomplish them, and often obtaining success through like effort, discipline, and that perseverance or grit. Whereas these almost get lumped together a lot of the time, but they're not the same thing. So even if it's just one takeaway on this dimension, it's like I'm a huge supporter in people having like big dreams, aiming high, but if we're highly sensitive on top of that, we need to be a lot more like discerning and being able to sort out what is it we're kind of going all in it with it, what goal and what's the right timing. And we kind of need to get like lovingly ruthless with saying no to other things because we need to conserve our energy. Like our energy and our bandwidth is one of the things we need to protect the most so that we're not spreading ourselves too thin. Because for many high achieving, highly sensitive people, like usually what I see happening the most, and I'm definitely been like prone to this too, is that we can take on too many things and want to achieve too many things at the same time, and then we're not doing a good enough job at all of them. But if we can weed it down to like a more manageable amount and being realistic of like what stage of life we're in, what kind of capacity we have to put towards those goals in a like long-term sustainable way. Because the burnout style, it's really being like, life is a marathon, and these longer term goals, it's like they take time and energy over a longer period of time. Like it's not a sprint. It's not like all-nighters for a week. You can maybe do that for a few days or a little bit longer if you have some recovery time later. But if you start doing that for weeks and months and then years, it's like you're setting yourself up for mental health and physical challenges too. And so perfectionism is not the same as high achieving, and perfectionism often gets in the way of high achieving because it's unrealistic goals. It's overly self-critical. It's fear of failure. It goes beyond like I can end up putting way too much time and energy into really small things that don't really move the needle towards like what's actually important in our goals. So sometimes like perfectionism can make good A students and good like university students like, oh, you got into the program. Perfectionism served here in life. It sometimes we actually have to work on like actually this is the standard here for this and it doesn't need to be A level all the time. And that's like a wise it's wisdom to have the ability to know like what needs A level performance and when a C is good enough. Because after school, like we're not getting graded. Some things do not need the amount of effort we're putting into them, and some things do. Um, so I won't go into details with these ones in too much depth, but workplace contributors like absolutely have been found in research to really increase risk of burnout as well. People who have enough time to get the tasks done in their workplace that they need to do are 70% lower risk of like moderate or severe burnout versus people who feel like they have to. But again, like that personality place can play in as well. So I think some of the things I would say is like if you have a very toxic like management or workplace dynamics where it's like there's bullying, there's emotionally immature leaders, like you're on edge or on eggshells all the time, that is one of the worst like mental health coordinated places in a workplace. Like sometimes there's work we can do to say like how do I manage this person differently, learning about different um how do I not let this bother me as much? What's some different communication styles I can use with this type of personality to get through it? But often in really toxic situations, sometimes it's more about, okay, how can I start planning how to get out or make a move somewhere where it is healthier? Because it can just make such a huge difference. And highly sensitive, empathic people, like one of the risks we have, or high achievers, is like sometimes we can get too focused on like, well, what can I do to make this better? That we can be at risk of staying in like toxic relationships or toxic workplaces like a lot longer than we should. And so just like one quick thing, maybe seeing like if it was a friend or someone you're close to and you're not invested in it, sometimes it really helps to pull ourselves out and look at, what kind of advice might I give or what might I want for this person? And like again, that doesn't mean we just quit and leave, but it might be like, do I need to upgrade some skills or make an exit plan, like start networking? Um, because workplace contributors can be a big one, but at the same time, like if we have a lot of the personality dynamics as well, we can go to workplace and end up in the same situation because usually it's so rare to have a manager or boss who's like really protecting like here's your exact hours of work today. Like that is all you're allowed to do. Everyone else leave them alone. Like that usually doesn't exist. So we usually have to have some level of boundaries and like more direct or assertive communication. We're professional kind, but we can also like be responsible for what's on our plate and communicating that and not like overworking all the time. And I mean, sometimes I'm not against people working overtime, but it's like if that makes sense for you and it's something you want to do to progress your career and it actually is going to, like there's a time and place to do that. But if you don't want to and if your job's not at risk, it's like why be volunteering that extra time for free? I'm a fan of like quiet quitting, which I just think that's like actually doing the job you were hired to do and that you're contracted to do. So, yes. The other piece I just want to touch on too is just the impact of societal contributors. So the systemic oppression and privilege. I mean, definitely there's different groups in kind of a system that we're still dealing with the legacy of like colonization, patriarchy, and a system that was built from a very kind of like more white supremacist type system. I mean, it doesn't mean it's not saying anybody's like racist or anything too. It's just saying like this is part of the system we're in. Part of that like anti-oppression work is multi-generational. It's going to take time, but it's not so easy to say, oh, well, just set boundaries or just do this. It's like we're all dealing with different levels of privilege or oppression. And privilege really isn't being like, oh, it doesn't mean you didn't work hard or like that you got things handed to you. It just means there wasn't extra barriers because you're a member of a certain group. So again, like sometimes women may be more at risk for burnout. Neurodiversity can make us more at risk. Highly sensitive trait that could be argued that's a form of neurodiversity because it's like our brains are wired a little bit differently than kind of the standard population. But sometimes people may have ADD or autism, and like that can add like other gifts as well as other challenges. So it's just to touch on that because to not make it completely individual or completely workplace related. It's like we do have these layers, and the more that's going on, um, just to have compassion for ourselves too. And sometimes it's like if we have more privilege or less risk, it's like sometimes we may be the ones to speak up in workplaces or other places, not just for ourselves, but for people where there is more risk, where it's like if we aren't too worried about our job security, but there's likely other people who are, if we're the one who starts having and modeling those conversations and can help to show that for other people there of like, is this a safe place to do that? In an ideal world, every workplace would actually um, like the law, not discriminate. But unfortunately, in the real world, it's like I would never push anyone to do anything, but I'd say like here's ways to maybe like see what's happening in your workplace. Like what are ways to kind of suss this out a little bit more to see like how safe is it? Um, so those are just some things to consider. Uh, So a bit on the burnout prevention and recovery. I won't get super into detail as well, and I'll send some more resources too. But I mean, the biggest thing I wanted people to take away is just knowing, like, being able to kind of take some ideas of like what might be some of the different factors that may kind of stack the deck towards like burnout vulnerability, um, and what might be next steps for you that stand out from that. One of the biggest things is just seeing like knowing what burnout is, because if you don't know what it is, people often self-treat it in ways that are really actually more geared towards treating depression, which can make the burnout worse. Like if you might be experiencing burnout, it is not just power through it and force yourself to do things. There needs to be some rest and recovery in there. A lot of it is more of like how do we have more work-life balance? Exercise is a huge one, or being able to process, like humans, we need ways to process stress through our body as well. That's exercise is one of the best things we can do for our mental health overall, even if it's just walking. If there's any concerns, of course, talk to your doctor. Things like connecting to a sense of meaning or purpose, just taking care of our basic needs like sleep, rest, really having connections and assertive support. I talked more about the boundaries and assertive communication because, like, I don't see boundaries and assertive communication separate from like the work-life balance and the sustainability, because we need to know those and communicate those to like actually protect other time for ourselves. Because we can really, if we just end up overcommitting to everything, if someone's like, "Hey, can you volunteer?" and like, "We want you to be the president," and you're like, "I didn't want to do this," and now you have all these other things like we actually need to actually be able to like protect time and space for rest and recovery. Like give ourselves permission to take it, even if we feel guilty, even if we like want to be more productive. Um, it's Canada and the US is interesting in the world because most of the world actually has way more vacation time, like has way more rest, has way more like just time and community. The more kind of capitalistic the culture, the more it feels like rest is like guilty or needs to be like earned as a result of productivity versus just inherently worthy in itself. And it really is. Yeah, so I talked a bit about the boundary piece. I won't spend a lot of time, so I'll open it up for questions around like what people are wanting to know more about. I'll send out these scales too if anybody's interested in learning more, diving in deeper, so that you have easy access to them. That's just a bit more about me and where you can find me. Yeah, so if anyone has anything they'd want, I'm also open to, I'd love to hear any feedback around like topics people would want to hear again. The next community webinar I have coming up is going to be It's going to be in Calgary in person, but it'll be recorded and it's with the Wellness Through Mindfulness group. So it's going to be more about getting into like the present moment as a portal to the past or future in terms of like that old emotional triggers that can come up, as well as like that intuitive connection with like supports that are helpful for us as well. Yeah, and so I'll open it up. I'm going to stop the recording.